On June 4th, 1944, the capital of Italy was captured by the Allies. 2 days later, the Allies made their most dramatic move into German-held France. The invasion was named Operation Overlord at the time, but to history, the date of the Allied landing in Normandy, June 6th, 1944, would be known simply as D-Day. The operation had been years in the making. It had been over 250 years since an invading army had crossed the English Channel. Its success would be the beginning of the end for Hitler's forces. Its failure could have meant the destruction of a massive number of Allied troops. Indeed, even in success, many Allied soldiers died on the beaches of Normandy. And a few American fighting men committed actions earning them the Medal of Honor. The attacking force was enormous. 5,000 ships carrying over 160,000 men and 30,000 assault vehicles crossed the channel separating Britain from northern France, striking 5 separate beaches along a 60-mile front. Close to 1,000 planes dropped in paratroopers, while another 300 bombed German defenses. Despite meticulous planning, the chaos of battle was amplified by the scale of the assault. Nearly 10,000 Allied troops were killed or wounded in the invasion. And the deadliest landing site was Omaha Beach. This was the landing reenacted in the movie Saving Private Ryan. Thousands died in the water and in the sand along that beach. Omaha Beach was divided into 10 sectors from east to west. The easternmost sectors, particularly the sectors known as Easy Red and Fox Green, were the most treacherous on that day. The first troops to land in those sectors were to be the 16th Infantry Regiment from the 1st Infantry Division, supported by 3 tank companies from the 741st Tank Battalion. Private First Class James Jordan was in the 16th L Company and part of the 1st Assault Wave. He later wrote about his experiences on D-Day.
At about 4 a.m. on the morning of June 6th, we began boarding the landing craft, or LCA, that would take us to the shore. Each had 30 men on board. For the assault, I carried 30 pounds of TNT, 20 clips of ammunition, combat vest, pills, K rations, special clothing in case of a gas attack, a shovel, and a lot of other equipment that I can no longer remember. In all, the gear weighed about 75 pounds, while I weighed 170. We were told we would have to run across 300 yards of open beach while under machine gun and artillery fire, and we knew that casualties would be high. The water was very rough. One of the LCAs from our ship capsized just after it entered the water, and 6 of the men were drowned.
Staff Sergeant Harley Reynolds, also with the 16th Regiment, wrote about his experience in the water.
We left our ship for the last time and went in single file to our rendezvous area, following the little light on the stern of the craft ahead of us. The light would disappear and then reappear as we rose and fell with the waves. The water was getting rough. I thought several times we would crash into the craft ahead as we came upon them and would have to back off. I could see the trail of phosphorus the craft was leaving behind us, and I thought the Germans must be able to see it too and pinpoint us. There are many films portraying what happened, but none as horrifying as my first view of the scene. We were trained to keep our heads down until time to unload, but being in command, I felt it better to know what was going on around us. I looked over and ahead many times, and what I saw was terrifying. The size of it all was stunning. The amount of ships and craft involved started materializing with the light of dawn. For as far as the eye could see, ships unloading troops and equipment. Battleships were cruising the shoreline, firing salvo after salvo, some of it just over our heads, point blank at the beach. Landing craft by the hundreds going to and from the beach. Planes had bombed the beach earlier, but I saw very little evidence of it. There was a noticeable absence of planes over our beach, even German planes, which I was glad of.
The official military history of the assault on Omaha Beach reports that the assault troops experienced their worst disappointment of the day when they found the beach unscarred by air bombardment. They were correct in concluding that the air bombardment had had little effect on the beach defenses. The overcast conditions that day made it difficult for aircraft to drop bombs accurately, putting the American troops and landing craft in danger. Adjustments to the bombing plan resulted in the bombs striking as much as 3 miles inland, where soldiers had planned to find craters to use as foxholes to take cover from German machine guns and mortar fire. There was a smooth, pristine beach. But the assault at Easy Red and Fox Green was difficult long before the soldiers reached the beaches. Again, Private James Jordan.
To both my right and left, and as far as I could see, landing crafts were headed at full speed to the Normandy coastline. With the sun rising, it was a remarkable sight. Almost immediately, we came under fire. Within minutes, for some reason, our boat started to take on water and we began to lag behind the other landing crafts. About 75 yards from the shore, with our boat sinking, our platoon commander gave the order to abandon ship. Just as he gave the order, we took a direct hit by an artillery shell to the middle of the craft, killing a number of men instantly. The ramp was dropped and those who were able began to get out. Several more men were killed or drowned as they exited the front of the boat. Some men climbed over the side. I had been seated in the back of the boat and attempted to get out the front. In order to make it to the exit ramp, I had to step over the bodies of my fellow soldiers and friends who were now lying dead on the floor of the boat. As I stepped off, another large wave hit me and I went completely under the water. With the weight of all that gear on my back, I began to sink fast and I knew that I was about to drown. Fortunately, I was able to get my pack off and reach the surface of the water, and I swam to shore.
Sergeant Harley Reynolds also described the scene.
I could see things were going wrong as we slowed down to go in. Some boats were coming back after unloading. Others were partly awash, but still struggling. Some were stuck, bottomed out, racing their motors and getting nowhere. Some were backing up short distances and trying again. The timing for the craft to land at intervals was as much awash as the storm. I was looking over the side often during these last minutes. We were moving slow because of other craft and obstacles the coxswain had to avoid. I saw direct hits on craft still far away from land. I doubt those on board, not wounded, made it to shore. I saw craft sideways being upturned and dumping troops into the water. I saw craft heavily damaged by shell fire being tossed around by the waves. I saw craft empty of troops and partly filled with water as though abandoned. awash in the surf. Men were among them struggling for the pitiful protection they gave.
Unfortunately, reaching the beach didn't mean reaching safety. Writer Flint Whitlock described what waited for them. The entire coastline was a gigantic steel and concrete nightmare for the attackers. Virtually every foot of ground was covered by direct and indirect fire weapons, rifles, machine guns, 105mm guns, and the dreaded 88s. Likely invasion beaches were studded with underwater and beach obstacles designed to rip the belly out of landing craft or blow them to bits with mines. Mines, too, were profligate under the beach sands and backed by thickets of barbed wire. Beyond the wire were concrete foxholes, elaborate trench systems, and concrete bunkers and gun emplacements sited to scythe down any invaders with enfilading crossfire. Again, Private James Jordan.
As badly as things had begun for me, once I made it to the beach, it got worse. The entire beach was a killing field. Artillery and machine gun fire were exploding all around me. Men were lying dead and wounded on the beach. Since I had lost my rifle along with my gear, I picked up a rifle lying on the beach and began running toward a 3 to 4 foot high seawall about 200 yards inland. As I was running across the beach, machine gun bullets began whizzing past me and hitting the ground just inches from my feet. Thinking that a German machine gunner had me as a target, I hit the ground. After a few seconds on the ground, I got up and continued running. Just as I got to within about 20 feet of the seawall, an artillery shell passed over my head and landed about 15 feet behind me. I immediately hit the ground. The shrapnel from the explosion passed over me but hit 5 men who had just reached the seawall in front of me. 2 of the men were killed instantly, and 3 were wounded, including our company commander. I got up again and ran the remaining distance to the seawall and the minimal shelter that it offered. Of the 30 men from my landing craft, only 12 were now left. The invasion had been underway for about an hour. Lieutenant Klink, who had also successfully crossed the beach, took charge of what was left of our platoon. I pointed out an area to Lieutenant Klink where I had seen Lieutenant Monteith's 2nd platoon, also of L Company, go to get off the beach.
First Lieutenant Jimmy Monteith, Jr., whom Private Jordan had spotted, would earn the Medal of Honor for his actions on this bloody day. In the initial chaos, Lieutenant Monteith resisted the terror that gripped so many, and he continually moved up and down the beach, reorganizing men for further assault. He then led the assault over a narrow protective ledge and across the flat, exposed terrain to the comparative safety at the base of a cliff. Then he went back to where 2 tanks were buttoned up and blind under violent enemy artillery and machine gun fire. Sergeant Aaron Jones, who witnessed the action, said, "He walked through that fire to bang on the sides of the tanks and instruct the men inside to follow him. Monteith led the tanks on foot, guiding them through a minefield until he had them set up to take out several enemy positions. The enemy machine guns temporarily quieted. Monteith then led his men to capture an advantageous position on the hill. Supervising the defense of his newly won position against repeated vicious counterattacks, he continued to ignore his own personal safety, repeatedly crossing the 200 or 300 yards of open terrain under heavy fire to strengthen links in his defensive chain. when the enemy succeeded in completely surrounding 1st Lieutenant Monteith and his unit, and while leading the fight out of the situation, 1st Lieutenant Monteith was killed by enemy fire. General Omar Bradley and General Dwight Eisenhower both recommended Lieutenant Jimmy Monteith for the Medal of Honor. The medal was presented to his mother in Richmond, Virginia on March 19, 1945. 3 other men committed actions earning them the Medal of Honor during the D-Day invasion. Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt Jr., eldest son of the former president, was only part of the assault wave that morning because he had asked for it 3 times. After his 2 verbal requests were denied, his written request to accompany the leading assault elements was approved. He was part of the assault wave hitting Utah Beach. During the invasion, despite the fact that he walked with a cane due to injuries received in the First World War, he repeatedly led groups of soldiers from the beach over the seawall and established them inland. As his citation notes, his valor, courage, and presence in the very front of the attack, and his complete unconcern at being under heavy fire, inspired the troops to heights of enthusiasm and self-sacrifice. Although he survived D-Day, General Roosevelt died of a heart attack on July 12, 1944. Back on Omaha Beach, Technician 5th Grade John Pender of the 16th Infantry served as a radio man. Despite being shot multiple times by machine gun fire, Technician 5th Grade Pender made multiple trips into the surf to salvage communications equipment. Rather than seek shelter or medical aid, Pender focused on establishing vital radio communication on the beach. He died while continuing to work the radio. Only 1 man performing actions to earn the Medal of Honor on June 6, 1944 would survive long enough to receive the award. Private Carlton Barrett of the 18th Infantry Regiment, 1st Infantry Division, had joined the 16th Regiment for its initial assault. He, his lieutenant, and 1 other soldier were tasked with finding a suitable landing area for the rest of the 18th Regiment. But the heavy fire on Omaha Beach made it clear that the 18th would not be landing on time. Their initial mission rendered impossible, they focused on the situation at hand. First, they had to survive disembarking from their landing craft in neck-deep water in the face of extremely heavy enemy fire. Then, Private Barrett, standing just 5'4" and weighing 125 pounds, returned to the surf again and again to assist his floundering comrades and save them from drowning. Refusing to remain pinned down by the intense barrage of small arms and mortar fire poured at the landing points, Private Barrett, working with fierce determination, saved many lives by carrying casualties to an evacuation boat lying offshore. When his own lieutenant took shrapnel wounds to the head, Private Barrett expertly bandaged the wound. He then began carrying wounded soldiers out to the landing crafts for evacuation. He continued this until taking multiple wounds himself. For his actions above and beyond the call of duty that day, Private Carlton Barrett would receive the Medal of Honor on October 2nd, 1944.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to help us produce more compelling historical content like this, please like, comment below, and share this video with fellow history buffs. And of course, be sure to subscribe to help keep history happening.